Intel Committee Democratic Mark Warner of Virginia. You know, yesterday we were talking about this Clayton
Katy,
nomination.
Didn't we just talk yesterday?
You were here. We were talking about what might happen. You talked about your meeting with him. Why do you think it was pulled? Or do you think that the Republicans are going to be willing to get rid of the filibuster, to give the president the SAVE Act, because he pulled Clayton and is now pushing Pulte on them, on everyone?
No, I don't think the Republicans are going to throw over the filibuster for basically a voter disenfranchisement bill that even if they did throw it over, I think there are 4 Republicans at least who've said they won't vote for it. SAVE Act is not going to become law. Thank God. You know, after the Voting Rights Act has been hurt by the Supreme Court, the idea that we're going to suddenly then disenfranchise every woman who changed their name if they got married, or turn over voter files to this crowd, it's not going to become law. It does show that Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about American national security. And the idea that in the middle of the night, at whatever time it was in France at that point, 4 o'clock in the morning our time, he jerks back a credible nominee just because we were probably going to confirm him quickly, shows his disrespect for American national security. And again, that he doesn't give a damn. It's beyond outrageous. I mean, on this one, you know, I'm happy to be angry at my Senate Republicans. This is not a Republican Democrat. I've been working well with the Senate Republicans. It is Donald Trump and Trump alone. And you know, Bill Pulte will probably walk in the door on Friday to the DNI, even though the office will be closed because it's a federal holiday, unless some of the serious people in the president's national security orbit can say, we're really playing with fire, Mr. President, if you do this.
So when you talk about the serious people in his orbit, I think you're talking about the CIA director, John Ratcliffe. What would be your plea to him?
I'm not talking about any particular individuals other than I do think there are some serious people, you know, across the administration about national security. We have offered jointly the president 2 or 3 off ramps. I think he is bound and determined to try to throw this live hand grenade into our national security environment. And again, my concern is not what Bill Pulte can do on 702. There are safeguards there. My concern is what happens if he gets access to some of our most classified secrets? I don't know if he'll keep them secret. What happens if he gets access to plans on how we're going to defend ourselves? I don't have any trust that inadvertently or overtly he might lay that. And I sure as heck don't have any confidence that he wouldn't try to weaponize the intelligence community against the integrity of our elections. You know, I thought a week ago when the president realized there was such bipartisan pushback against Pulte that by putting forward Jay Clayton, that I'm sure most of the Democrats would have probably still voted against, I was going to give him, you know, see how he did today, because I've known him, that there was at least a path out. And the president has, you know, literally destroyed that path, at least as we stand here Wednesday afternoon.
So are you telling me the position that we are in right now is just hoping that there are responsible people within the administration who are able to go to the president and convince him to put Clayton back on the table in order for Pulte not to walk in the door on Friday? Is that the best hope we can hope for right now?
No, 2 points. One is, and we didn't know what would happen when this tool, Section 702 of the FISA bill, which allows our spy agencies to listen to foreigners talking to each other abroad, that occasionally does, you know, if an American is mentioned, we don't know. We have to look and see whether the American's a spy or a victim. We didn't know when that expired whether the communication companies that work with the government would still work with us. So far, they have. So we've not had a lapse in intelligence gathering. But that could go away at any moment, because somebody could say, well, we're just not going to work with you anymore. In terms of our ability to stop Pulte unless my Republican friends on this one would actually say we got to adhere to the law on DNI says, Director of National Intelligence says, not only do you have to have national security experience, but if the DNI is removed, the number 2 becomes the acting DNI. There is no provision to have an acting DNI the way the president has proposed. And the number 2 is a career intelligence professional. I didn't vote for him, but he's got the bona fides, and I don't think he would disclose secrets. His name is Mr. Lucas. So, I think the president, by putting Pulte in, is again going against the letter of the law, but I'm not sure that there will be an action that will prevent him. And I don't know whether people will slow roll exposing him to classified information, but we don't know. With Clayton, is he just going to get rescheduled, or has his nomination been pulled? And I don't think Jay Clayton knows that either.
Let's talk about what the president has released, the White House has released regarding Iran. There's an MOU that's out. We can put it up on the screen. These are the bullet points we have on it. Ceasefire and end to hostilities, respect for sovereignty, negotiate a final deal within 60 days, end the blockade, safe passage to the Strait of Hormuz, reconstruction and development for Iran, end sanctions after Iran shows progress. There's a lot to be considered there, I assume. Iran promises no nuclear weapon to resolve enriched uranium issue. Iran maintains current nuclear program. Oil export waivers for Iran, releasing frozen Iranian assets, monitoring, and negotiating on the remaining issues. How do you feel about this MOU?
I feel that it puts America in a weaker position than we were before the war started. Let me go quickly through. Number one, Iran had already promised not to develop a nuclear weapon, so this promise is a continuation of what existed. The memo doesn't even mention Iran's ballistic missile capability, which we know still 50% plus still exists, and they continue to bomb our allies in the region. Number three, there is at least a hangover on the Strait of Hormuz going forward, because the Iranians still have literally hundreds of speedboats which they can put mines in, and we're going to talk about it. And on the enriched uranium, we're no further ahead than when we started. At least under JCPOA, the Obama agreement, we had eyes on the enriched uranium, and we actually had Russia and China on our side. Russia and China are now on Iran's side. And then finally, the fact that the memorandum doesn't even mention the Iranian proxies. The number that's been bandied around is $300 billion. $300 billion. I think Obama was going to give him $1 billion or somewhere in that neighborhood. $300 billion. If you don't think some of that money is going to end up in the hands of Hezbollah or the Houthis in Yemen, then you're pretty naive. And again, if you look at least the published reports of the Secretary of State and the Director of CIA saying, hey, Mr. President, we're not sure we can trust these guys. I think, Donald Trump's a good salesman. I will give him that. But there is no way that Donald Trump can sell the American people, or the world for that matter, that this puts America and our allies in the region in a stronger position than they were before late February when he started this war of choice.
So what's the better scenario? What's the better move?
The better move, quite honestly, I'm glad he's going to declare victory. People will see through it. We'll end up probably in a worse position than we were with JCPOA. But the alternative of continuing to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, the idea that we were going to bomb Iran into submission, the vulnerability because we have been using up most of our defensive missiles to shoot down the Iranian missiles, and we're kind of low on stockpiles, the idea that we were going to continue the war for another 50 or 100 days would be a worse disaster. The better deal would have been that the president wouldn't have started this war of choice without having a full plan, or without going to the Congress, or without going to the American public. Think about, again, the Iranian culture and people are remarkable. We have a huge Iranian diaspora in Virginia. I feel for the people. The idea that the Iranian people who are rising up in January because of the oppression of the regime, 30,000 plus brutally murdered by the regime, And now you've got a regime that's more extreme. I don't think this memorandum of understanding, it reverses any effort that America might have to try to bring about reform in Iran. It literally says respect for sovereignty, which in human speak means we're not going to try to mess with you at all going forward. And that means the Iranian people who are rising up, their Iranian secret police, I'm sure after this is signed, will literally kill hundreds, if not thousands more.
Gosh, that's bleak. Senator, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it, as always. 2 days
We'll
in a row.
see what happens tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.